Hello everybody, my name is Adam Thorne and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. I am joined as usual by Jake Nelson. Welcome to the show.
Can't get rid of me that easy, Adam.
No, and as sometimes guest, Benjamin Foster. Ben, how are you?
Well, thank you, Adam.
Have we got any shout-outs, announcements this week before we crack into the serious business of discussing the news?
Well,
Since when was us discussing the new serious business?
Well, that's true. That's true.
Well, just basically to keep our listeners up to date with the Australian Aviation Summit. Very, very excited to have that taking place on the 29th of August, in accordance with, in parallel rather, with our Australian Aviation Awards. So very excited to have that with our principal partner, Leidos. We'll also be having Wing, which is a part of Google, as a partner. Copilot Consulting is another one who helps with helping organisations, flight schools, get more students into their funnel, which is always a bit of a passion project for myself, but also for marketing and automation software Copilot. So yeah, very, very excited about it.
Yeah, good.
Very excited about it.
Jake, have we got any shout outs from your ends?
Shout out to you, Adam.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No, I do need it.
And shout out to people who don't know what the opposite of in is.
Right, okay.
Sure.
Jesus. Right, let's steam into the news. Jake, where are we starting? What's happening this week?
Well, we got an interesting bit of data from a YouGov survey today, Adam, just to start with, which basically there was a survey of 1,500 people conducted between the 31st of May and the 4th of June. This was, sort of after the collapse of Bonza, which we'll get to in a moment. But 50% of these people said that government should support low-cost carriers to, quote, enable a competitive market and to keep air travel accessible to more Australians. 27% were opposed and 23% were undecided. Greens voters had the highest support, 57% in favour. Labor voters, 53% in favour. Only 45% of coalition voters were in support, but this was still more than those who were opposed, which was 34%. So at least a plurality of all the people surveyed and all the different party affiliations surveyed said that the government should be doing more to back low-cost carriers.
So is this specifically low-cost carriers, or what do they want? Are they talking money? Like what kind of? What's it calling for?
The survey didn't say anything about what kind of support. So the exact survey question, I'm just bringing it up, was the history of exact wording. The history of Australian aviation includes around 300 defunct airlines since the last century, with regional budget airline Bonza being the most recent to enter administration. Do you believe that the Australian federal government should help support low-cost airlines to enable a competitive market and to keep air travel accessible to more Australians? So the question was non-specific as to how. Yeah. But from that, 50% of people said yes.
So it's interesting because this isn't something, this basically happened before, during COVID. And obviously COVID was an extraordinary time. But what happened is the federal government came in and supplemented routes. And they did that because the argument was you needed to have some flights to keep the nation going. You had obviously cargo that needed to be delivered and important meetings that sometimes needed to be attended. But the argument is we also have the routes that may not necessarily be commercially viable, but are necessary. So it's not...
like a bus service, yeah.
Exactly. Completely agree, except obviously much more glamorous on a plane than on a bus.
Depends on the plane and the bus, Adam. You might argue that your average Sydney bus, for example, is more glamorous than a Ryanair flight.
It's not. I don't know. To be fair, the people are worse than a Ryanair flight, but, I think they're...
I can't get over the 300 Australian airlines that have gone defunct in the last century.
Jake, can you name all of them?
No.
And if you do, I'll give you $10,000.
Could you name a tenth of them? Even 30?
How many can you rack off?
I'm now thinking of that Animaniacs, the Animaniacs songs where they name all the presidents and the the countries of the world.
No, it's actually, I do remember that. Well, they put some here: Tiger Air, Fly Corporate, Pacific Air Express.
You got people like Ansett, yeah, East West Airlines, Bonza, JetGo.
That's not even 10. So 300.
Trans-Australian is an odd case because it was basically folded into Qantas, as I recall.
Sure.
TAA, which later became Australian Airlines. And then there was the later Australian Airlines, which was an arm of Qantas that just sort of got quietly done away with. Impulse became Jetstar eventually, but there have been quite a few. And Compass Mark 1 and Mark 2 obviously are the airlines that people most commonly invoke when talking about Bonza.
There needs to be some kind of element of a competition here. Now, there's probably some on the internet. If you can name every single one that's gone under, we will give you a free ticket to the Australian Aviation
Absolutely,
Summit.
free ticket to the Australian double pass. Bring a friend.
And we will also be slightly terrified of you.
Yeah. So what we need, every single... I don't know how we verify this, but it will be possible. That'll be a job for you, Jake.
Will it, Adam?
Right. If you can, media at australianaviation.com.au, we want to know the name of every single Australian airline that's ever gone under. And we go back from the start of time, not just recently. Every single one, those regional ones. If you know, tell us. And you've got to do it by... So this will go out on Wednesday. So you've got till...
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
2 weeks. You just Google it then. I want people that... Whoever can get the most. So by Friday, COB, the end of the day, Friday, as many as you can name. And whoever names the most, 2 tickets.
Yep.
2 tickets to the Australian Aviation Summit.
Sitting on the table with...
I don't want to sit next to that loser. If you can name 300, don't get near me.
My brain's
No.
Don't say that.
No.
Now my brain's just going. There's Tiger Air, Bonza, and ANZ and East Western.
Yeah. If you can make a
like
song
Corporate
out of
Pacific
it all.
Air Express and JetGo and.
I do know the reference.
Yeah.
Right, let's talk about. So we touched on.
But yes, So getting back to this survey for a moment. 23% of the people surveyed said that they had flown on one of those airlines in the past 5 years. 14% for Tiger Air alone, which was the highest, which does make sense because Tiger Air was for a while the Jetstar of Virgin, if you will, and that was still going in 2019 before the pandemic. I've flown on Tiger Air once, I think. Once.
I did too. Yep.
But
it was delayed too.
Yeah,
true to form.
But it is a fairly serious issue in Australian aviation. One thinks that basically, now that Bonza is no longer flying, once again, your choices if you want a low-cost carrier are Jetstar or nothing. Virgin has its sort of hybrid model, and Rex is kind of playing in the same space as Virgin and Qantas with its domestic jet operations. But in terms of, an actual true low-cost carrier, you only have Jetstar. And that's, not great if you want choice in the low-cost market.
I mean, what if it says federal government backing? What would that actually look like? To your
money,
point earlier.
cold hard cash.
It could be subsidies, could be tax breaks, could be things like that. But you'd have to imagine it would be some kind of monetary support.
I think it would be the routes. I think that's just like they did during COVID.
Yeah, help with getting approvals for routes and things like that.
Like you've obviously had Bonza that had a situation where they're wide and as a company as a whole, obviously initially wasn't breaking even, wasn't making money, but there clearly were routes that worked.
And they've said that they were on track to be breaking even.
Yeah, so there surely must be other. Surely we can have a bit of imagination here. Other point-to-point routes that perhaps maybe couldn't necessarily support 100% load factors at every flight. But if you had some support, that could get them there and could sustain that, because it's important. Like if you get on a flight to a holiday destination, you are bringing money that way. You are reinvigorating the economy.
Well, I've seen a YouTube video by an excellent YouTuber, Sam of Wendover Productions. Any Wendover Productions fans out there in the audience, let us know. We love Wendover, or at least I love Wendover. I don't know. You two might be indifferent. But I saw a video of his basically going through why longer haul low cost carriers tend to fail, and sort of the conclusion that he came to is that the low cost carriers that succeed are the ones that at least in the long haul market are the ones that don't necessarily try to piggyback on demand that's already there, but create new demand. Fly to places that major airlines don't think to fly to, which was on a smaller scale what Bonza was trying to do.
Right. Speaking of Bonza, we've had a number of updates this week. Jake, what's the latest?
So, as you say, a number of updates. I think the main one in terms of Bonza's staff, as far as they are concerned, is that they are finally able to start the process now. The administrators have instructed them that they can start filling out the forms to get their entitlements under the government's fair entitlements guarantee, though Bonza has not yet been officially wound up. You wrote the story, Adam. Would you like to delve a little bit more into this?
Yes, you do this every week now. It's like, well, you wrote the story so you can do the time, which is fair enough. So effectively, this is called the Fair Entitlement Guarantee, is the government scheme that means, which is brilliant, if your company kind of goes under or goes into liquidation and you are unable to get your money back from the company, the government will settle the bills, or it will settle your unpaid wages and unpaid holiday, etc., etc. Now, the problem Bonza staff have had is they've been in kind of limbo because Bonza went into administration, and what administration means, obviously, is effectively that an organisation takes over the day-to-day running of a company in an attempt to either find a buyer or eventually liquidate the company. Paul Chadwick, the administrator, spent a month or so trying to find a buyer. They kind of eventually, or they've effectively now kind of given up hope. But until that company is liquidated, then technically speaking, the staff are not able to go and get their money. So what Hall Chadwick, the administrator, have done now is effectively talk to the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations and said to accelerate the process, the staff can kind of fill out their forms and submit their forms just to speed things up. It looks like from what we're hearing now that the liquidation is a formality. This certainly what the messages that are coming out. The administrator have basically said that there is going to be a meeting, and in this meeting we're going to discuss, the process of whether or not we liquidate the company. So it looks like that's kind of now Bonza is all but done. But at least now this speeds up the process so that staff can begin to get unpaid wages. From what we know, Bonza staff were not paid, I think, for all of April, if that was right, Jake. You probably remember. I think it was all of April.
Yeah, they weren't paid for April.
So they've not been paid for April. They've not been paid for May. Obviously, they've not been paid since then. So that's kind of 2.5 or 3 months worth of wages that they've been denied. The other issue that they had, not in the last few weeks, but at the start, was that if you are a full-time employee of a company and it goes into administration and you quit to get another full-time job elsewhere, then that makes it harder for you to get your money back through the Fair Entitlement Guarantee, and you basically become another creditor and will get a small percentage of what you're owed. So people weren't even allowed to look for jobs elsewhere. So
they were slightly helped. A silver lining in some bad news when Hall Chadwick did counterintuitively sack them all. That did actually help them in a kind of a perverse way, because it freed them up to go looking for work with other airlines without losing those entitlements.
And I think we've spoken before, I can understand why the current employees of Bonza or the now former employees were very angry at the administrator for not, doing all of this stuff quicker. But from their point of view, they have to look after all of the creditors, and they had to do what they had to do to try to find a buyer initially, and nobody was going to buy the airline if it didn't have any staff. So I kind of get that they keep everybody in mind. And so that was kind of one big story about Bonza this week. The second sort of story, which actually both myself and Jake wrote about, was the impact it's going to have on the Sunshine Coast. So Bonza has 3 bases, but it's kind of its OG base, to use the God, what an old man
HQ.
I am. Yeah, to be their sort of main base, or one of their 2 original bases, was at the Sunshine Coast. And what it's done is sort of dramatically shrivel the Sunshine Coast sort of network. So Bonza's collapse is going to end up hitting them really, really, really hard. So I think in January, they hit an all-time high for the number of passengers that travel through each month. And the March, which was effectively the last full month of Bonza, the actual numbers were 65%.
Technically, I guess, Bonza sort of went into administration at the very end of April.
Which is why I said technically. So technically that was the last one, yeah? I chose my words carefully. Yeah, you're trying to catch me out, mate. I know what I'm doing. So that is technically the last full month that it operated. And so the numbers were 65% up on the same month in 2019. And obviously you go from 2019 because that was pre-COVID. Bonza only launched last year. So they are going to take, the Sunshine Coast Airport is going to take an enormous hit. Now the problem is, of course, that the airport itself would have employed people, would have upped their infrastructure in order to make this happen. So it's going to affect Sunshine Coast Airport. It's also going to have, a larger effect on that area that was really reaping the benefits. You had suddenly all these destinations that were flying into the Sunshine Coast, and it's going to hit them very, very hard. And there was another story, I believe, Jake, it was the Sunshine Coast mayor. He was saying we need some help here.
Yeah, this was Rosanna Natoli, the mayor of Sunshine Coast Council. She wrote to Stephen Miles, Premier of Queensland, asking for help, basically saying, we have benefited so much from the presence of Bonza since it launched, and its collapse, could basically cost us more than $100 million. She said, going to your point, Adam, Bonza had accounted for more than 20% of Sunshine Coast's airport activity since its first flight, more than 490,000 additional passengers. She said that around 150 Bonza jobs were based in the Sunshine Coast region. That's around half the total employees. And, local businesses, not just the tourism industry, obviously, but suppliers, cleaning, catering, support services, all of these local businesses are going to be basically impacted by this lost revenue from Bonza. She said that the majority of products sold on board Bonza were supplied by 11 Southeast Queensland-based suppliers. So it's going to be a pretty rough time for the Sunshine Coast, for Sunshine Coast travel, Sunshine Coast tourism, Sunshine Coast Airport. Now that Bonza appears to be gone, it's going to be helped somewhat by this new this new Jetstar service. Is it Jetstar or Air New Zealand service? But there is a new service that's going to be going to New Zealand. I think it's a Jetstar service from Sunshine Coast, so that will help. But it's not going to cover the massive hole that's been left behind. I
head up to the Sunny Coast quite a bit. My folks have moved. They've migrated from Sydney up to around Maroochydore way. Beautiful part of the world. You know the slogan, Adam. Beautiful one day, perfect the next.
I have heard it. Classic Australian arrogance. Ego.
But I think, and a lot of people are moving up that way. Definitely from down south up to the Sunshine State. I feel really bad for a lot of the small businesses that are going to be around there. Your Monday Markets is a huge place, which is further up. They have these massive markets on a Wednesday and a Saturday, I think it is. But then you've got your other beaches places, which the Bonza planes would fly over, Mooloolaba, further up near Majimba, all these beautiful, beautiful places. So that's really going to hit the tourism side hard. And give an opportunity for a lot of people to fly, not just from the Sydney and Melbourne routes, but from more of these remote places to get to God's country.
So what I think we should do is when the BITRA, which is the Department of Transport, effectively they release all kinds of aviation statistics, and they release international statistics on load factors. But I don't think they release that kind of from every destination in Australia to every other destination. Surely now Bonza is pretty much gone. I see no reason why we can't be public about which of their routes were doing well and why, because surely that gives an incentive for other airlines to move in. At the moment, there's still a lot of mystery over exactly what was working and what wasn't, but surely some of these routes that were performing well can be saved.
Yeah, and, a point that, Tim Jordan, the CEO of Bonza, made frequently in press releases in particular was, routes that went from Sunshine Coast to Townsville or Mackay or, places like that. That's cutting very short a really, really long road trip. It's either, hit the highway for hours and hours to get to, Brisbane or some major airport to fly out of if you need to go anywhere else, or, hop on an hour Bonza flight. And with those hour Bonza flights gone, those people are going to have to go back to either driving, taking massive road trips or,
The bus.
Or an infrequent train maybe or plane service with Qantas Link or Rex or Skytrans or whoever. So it's a real problem, and as well as that the cost factor. Flying, Qantas Link or Rex is probably going to be more expensive than a Bonza flight was. I mean, going back for a moment to that YouGov survey, 77% of the people surveyed said that cost is in their top 2 most important factors when flying, and 50% ranked cost as the most important factor. It's in a time when cost of living is going up, it's going to hurt the hip pockets.
Or people just won't go.
Which will, hurt the local economies, the destinations economies. So it's a sad and sorry tale.
Okay, welcome back. So we are going to discuss now the latest release of the kind of on-time performance. You'd think this was as simple as simply one airline wins, but what tends to happen every single month is every airline declares victory. Jake, who are the runners and riders? Who's actually won this heavyweight clash?
You've got a number of factors, as we say. In cancellations, some surprising news is that while Rex came out on top in cancellations, by which we mean they came out on the bottom, they had the fewest cancellations, which is the best if you're looking at cancellation figures. While Rex had across its network 0.8% cancellations, Jetstar had just 1.1% of its flights cancelled for the month of May 2024. That is lower than Virgin at 2.1% and Qantas Link at 2.6%. So, both of the sort of larger, I guess, full service or, hybrid / full service carriers lost out to Jetstar, which historically has a reputation for high cancellations.
So, I mean, the interesting thing... I mean,
Jetstar really turned its game around, you'd have to think.
So it's interesting here because obviously Qantas is a full service airline, but the biggest reason you spend to go with Qantas, or in fact perhaps you spend to go with Virgin, is because you hope it'd be less likely to be delayed, and if it is, that they've got more resources and capacity to help you out. In reality, you should just have saved your money and gone on Jetstar. You got to destination quicker, or more likely not to be cancelled.
In terms of on-time performance, Qantas and Qantas Link combined, so this is all QF designated services, which Bitra tends to lump together. Qantas and Qantas Link combined got 80.6% on-time departures, 79.4% on-time arrivals. This put them back above Virgin, which was on 78.9% OTD, 77.7% OTA. Rex's domestic jet operations beat both of them. So that's 85.5% on-time departures for its jets, 82.7% on-time arrivals, 0.6% of flights cancelled. Rex has, by the way, claimed it is the most reliable major airline in Australia, which does raise the question of exactly what constitutes a major airline, because Rex, while it is operating capital city flights and does have 737s, it's still got a fraction of the market share of Qantas and Virgin. It's the third biggest airline group, but in Australia, where 80 to 90% of the capacity is taken up by Qantas / Jetstar and Virgin, you have to wonder what that's worth. What is a major airline these days?
So how have they defined that? So have they beaten Virgin, Jetstar, Qantas? Is that
they have their jets have beaten Virgin, Jetstar, and Qantas. Their regional network, was a bit less reliable, so it's sort of brought down their overall figures. across its entire network, they had 80.1% OTD, 77.1% OTA, 0.8% cancellations. So that's not as good as, just the jet services on their own. Now, across all participating airlines, you had 79.6% on-time departures, 78.6% on-time arrivals, and 2.1% cancellations. OTD and OTA were both below the long-term averages, though cancellations also slightly beat the long-term average of 2.2%. So cancellations are ever so slightly below the long-term average.
So we are drowning in data here. I'm getting all kinds of
numbers.
You're going, and I like this. I'm a details guy. I love the detail, right? But this can be very confusing for listeners, for everyone really. So we're going to have a new feature on this show that we're going to do once a month. So obviously, all the data's come out. It is very subjective. I want to hear the Jake Nelson Award for Airline of the Month. You have crunched the numbers, you've heard all the arguments, and now you have to anoint a winner for this month. And I should say, if you are listening, Qantas, Virgin, Rex, if you want to put this on your TV commercials, on your radio commercials, on your billboards, it can be the Jake Nelson Airline of the Month for whatever.
Airline or even route of the month.
No, don't complicate. It's a Jake Nelson Award for Airline of the Month, and this is for the month of May. Mm-hmm. Jake, who is your winner?
In terms of domestic jets,
No, there's only one. No, because it's going to complicate it. There is simply, we're obviously talking domestic, we are simply talking, who is the Jake Nelson, or the Jake Nelson Award for Airline of the Month? Who is it?
Looking at the figures, it would be Rex.
Rex, congratulations,
Rex. Well done.
Well done.
Because Rex, and I'm looking only at the jet operations here, because Rex was the best in terms of on-time departures, on-time arrivals, and on-time, not on-time cancellations, just regular cancellations. I don't know if you can have an on-time cancellation, but Rex was the best in terms of its domestic jets for on-time departures, on-time arrivals, and cancellations, according to the figures. There's basically no contest there.
So obviously Rex has got a new CEO, cracking start for his tenure.
But honourable mention to Jetstar on the cancellations because 1.1% of flights cancelled, especially for Jetstar, is a real achievement.
So this is the Jake Nelson Airline of the Month, highly commended.
Yeah, highly commended.
Highly commended. Okay.
And then is there a participation award? Just the remaining two?
No, because if we have 4 and we end up giving 3 awards, then what's the point?
Well, look, Qantas and Virgin are also there.
They are also there. I imagine crisis meetings now in
all over the land.
On average, yeah. I mean, on average, performance is getting back up towards the long-time averages.
Yeah.
Across all major airlines, it is sort of getting. It is getting better, and all the airlines should be congratulated for getting things back to the long-term averages. Now they just got to improve on the long-term averages.
Be congratulated.
Okay, welcome back. Well, talking of drivel. Did you just see what happened there?
Ben walked out the studio door. He said he had a thing to get to.
Oh, you're an idiot! You're a nightmare. You're just a nightmare, honestly. Right, I'm going to ignore you now. I'm going to talk about a story that I've written for once, and this is...
What do you mean for once? I tell you to talk about stories you've written all the time.
That's true. So basically, this is a very, very interesting story because obviously and I will bring Jake in a little bit in a moment on this. Obviously, Boeing has had all sorts of problems this year, which stemmed, I think it was in January, when they had the door plug blow off a 737 MAX. And obviously that grounded that particular variant of the aircraft, I think, for a couple of weeks. But the FAA, who are the kind of the US safety authority, were rightly furious. And one of the kind of long ongoing things they did was to cap production of the MAX at just 38 a month. And I think they have been hoping, obviously, to go far beyond that. Now, this, along with other kind of supply chain problems, has led to a kind of global shortage of aircraft. Like, it's hard to get hold of an aircraft. This is directly affecting Virgin Australia, no fault of Virgin Australia's, and it arguably played a small bit significant problem with Bonza as well, because they needed more aircraft, they needed them quickly, and what was happening was they couldn't get them, and aircraft were being traded around the wider 777 partners network. So the problems at Boeing are international, but they have huge local issues as well. So one of the biggest things that Boeing has been working on for the last 10 years is its Starliner spacecraft. That's right, I'm going into orbit. So effectively,
Australian Aviation Space Connect crossover.
There we go. So basically, they've been working on this. So at the moment, if you want to reach the International Space Station, the only way of doing it regularly from the US is with SpaceX, who have had the kind of monopoly on this for the last few years. Obviously, Boeing, who are a traditional space company, have been vying to have an alternative. So they were meant to launch this Starliner spacecraft at the start of last month. So what are we in now? The start of May. That launch was delayed by 3 or 4 weeks. And again, there were all sorts of kind of minor problems. And then it finally blasted off at the start of this month. The plan was the astronauts would basically go up there, spend a week on the International Space Station, and then come back home. We are now now have absolutely no date as to when they're going to come back. So they're meant to be up there for a week. They're likely going to be up there for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. And what this means is the astronauts are effectively, and it's quite a tabloid word, but they are effectively stranded on the International Space Station. Now, there are two ways of looking at this. The first way of looking at this is that, as they say, space is hard. It's not straightforward. You know, SpaceX, when they test their rocket that they're going to send to Mars, they just send them up and watch them blow up, and they keep sending them up and keep sending them up. It's not easy. Things go wrong. But the way of looking at it from an aviation point of view is, and to use a PR phrase, the optics are terrible. So you've got a company under so much pressure at the moment for their kind of culture. And then you've got a situation where these two astronauts are on the International Space Station and they can't at the moment get a ride home. So the whole thing is looking really bad. The problem that they had was that initially, when they started having problems, they started saying with the launch, you know, we're going to go next week, we're going to go next week, we're going to go next week. And it's all of the endless changes. We've had the same thing with these astronauts returning home. They go, don't worry, these are very, very minor problems. So we've had some problems with the thruster and with the helium. Very minor problems. Don't worry, we'll be back in a few days. We'll be back in a few days. And the problem with this is obviously journalists start to get suspicious. They start to think, hang on a minute, maybe there are wider
Those
problems.
shifty bastards.
Exactly.
They're always poking around the edges.
Exactly. And so the problem is this all just adds to this idea that Boeing globally do have some kind of problem. My view looking at this is actually, these are very minor issues, and they have said that if needs be, the thing can go back to Earth in case of emergency. So I do feel a bit sorry for NASA and for Boeing. But at the same time, it just looks bad. It just looks bad.
It does. And this is coming as well, in more bad news for Boeing, as these US prosecutors are recommending that criminal charges are being brought against the plane maker for breaching this 2021 agreement over the MAX 8 disasters that basically shielded Boeing. I'm looking at ABC News here, shielded Boeing from this criminal charge of conspiracy to commit fraud. So US prosecutors are recommending now to these senior Justice Department officials to throw the book at Boeing over these MAX 8 incidents. So it's kind of a and as a British person, Adam, this is a term you'll be familiar with, an annus horribilis for Boeing at the moment.
Excellent news. One of Her Majesty's greatest turns of phrase. I do feel a little bit sorry for Boeing in a sense, in that if you work at Boeing, like obviously you've got Boeing's kind of commercial aircraft operation, but you've also got Boeing's defence operation, you've got Boeing's space operation, and you've got Boeing, which is basically based all around the world. Now, clearly, there has been an issue with culture. You know, their main playmaking factory, I think it's in Seattle, off the top of my head. They have had an issue there, which has been well documented. They've been fined billions of dollars over that. But obviously, everyone over the whole company ends up kind of taking the flak for this, even though they might all be very different teams. It just feels like it's one set of bad news after another set of bad news after another set of bad news for Boeing. They need rapidly to turn this around. They need to get this cap on Maxes lifted quickly. Because this cap was introduced in January. I think it was January, or might have been February, after they lifted the outright ban. They are now sort of 20 or so behind where they need to be. So they need to get this cap there. One, for Boeing, because they need to make more money than they are. Secondly, because airlines need it. If you've got Boeing and Airbus are your only two options, and if you put down a big order, it's not hard to get out of that. So I think
not easy to get out of it.
Not easy to get out of it even, yes. And so I think there was an interview, I think, with Jane Litka at Virgin a couple of weeks ago, and she said we don't regret buying these Boeings because our business model now is that we effectively operate one aircraft. We operate the Boeing 737s. That has kind of economies from scale from us, so we don't regret it at all. But at the same time, they're now in a difficult situation because it's not easy for them to just say we're going to dump that order, we're going to go with Airbus. Because even if they could do, they're going to be back of a queue.
Yeah, where are they going to get new A320s?
Well, this is it. This is the problem, is that when you have one of the two plane makers in this much trouble, it has these knock-on effects. It genuinely think it was a substantial, might be too far, but it was a factor in Bonza going under, and it's having massive ramifications with Virgin, because it's not just the case of, oh, we just get rid of the old planes, we bring them the new ones, aren't they? They got the new plane smell. Firstly, they'll be relying on this, and they'll be making forecasts because these new aircraft are more fuel efficient, so that means they can save more money. But it's also causing them to pause routes. It potentially might stop them launching routes in future.
Well, if you recall last year, they were planning to launch this route from, I think it was Cairns to Haneda in Tokyo, with the 737 MAX 8, and they didn't have any, so they had to use 737-700s to do this route initially until they started getting their MAX 8s.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very, very difficult situation. And again, it just seems to be bad news after bad news after bad news for Boeing.
But look, as for the astronauts, I do have a suggestion there.
Here we go. It's coming.
Look, when Bonza went under, when Bonza cancelled its flights, Qantas, Jetstar, Virgin, they stepped in and offered free flights. They offered free flights to affected Bonza passengers. So, hey, listen, guys, Qantas, Jetstar, Virgin, excellent opportunity for some free PR. Get those astronauts home.
So just to recap, so some pilot he's flying with 737 for Qantas, listening to us talk nonsense,
which we shouldn't be doing.
But
if he's flying the plane.
They probably do. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to be a hero and just sort of
just get it up there.
Get it up there. Yeah. And he goes up there. I think that could be bad, because when they say what was it that caused this dramatic incident, it could come back on us. Like, I don't want the ATSB report to be like, whoever it is, 30 years in the sky, very experienced, but then he heard from what was supposed to be the industry experts, and he made a play for he made a play for the International Space Station.
But Adam, can you imagine if it worked?
It would be.
Can you imagine if it worked? We would be heroes. We would be heroes, Adam.
We would be heroes, but there's a 1% chance. Not 1%. There's a 0% chance, because that's actually physically impossible that we'd be heroes.
Hey, with that attitude, Adam.
With that attitude. If you are from any major airline, domestic or international, don't try and go to space in an aircraft. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
You got to believe in yourself sometimes, Adam.
Okay.
Hey, speaking of Qantas, we had an announcement today from Qantas Link. They are getting rid of their Q300 and Q200 aircraft and switching to basically for turboprop operations or turboprop operations, I guess, and all Q400 fleet.
So these are, let's just, before we get into turbo nerditry, these are Dash 8s. These are different variants of a Dash 8, right?
Yes. So the Q300s, the Q200s are sort of older, smaller planes than the Q400s that they are getting. So these new ones are going to be having 78 seats, being sourced from we're told, a reputable international carrier. So these are sort of in the middle of their life.
It's just like when you did that April Fool's joke and there was like an airplane dealership, because these are midlife. So I can imagine just Vanessa going down there and like, can you do me a deal?
Qantas having a midlife crisis saying,
No.
Qantas having a midlife crisis saying, I'll take some of those planes, paint them bright red and put a racing stripe on the side.
Exactly. That's what I imagine it.
No, it's they're buying these effectively second-hand Q400s from an international airline. They're going to be coming in at the end of the 2024 calendar year, which basically is going to bring the total Q400 fleet of Qantas up to 45. So they're getting rid of these 19 older, smaller planes in favour of 14 Q400s, which do have a higher capacity.
So they're going to have slightly less aircraft when this all comes out in the wash, but slightly higher capacity, and they're going to be a bit quicker.
roughly the same, or higher capacity. But Vanessa Hudson does say that the Q400s are more than 30% faster, especially if you put the racing stripes on the side,
of course.
And paint them red, produce less carbon emissions per passenger and are on average 10 years younger than the aircraft that they're replacing. She says, quote here, by consolidating our turboprops into a single fleet type, we'll be able to further improve our reliability and provide a better recovery for customers during disruptions, as well as reducing complexity and cost for our operation. She's also said that these are going to basically allow them to keep the regions connected over the next 10 years or so while they're working to look for new electric or battery-powered aircraft that are the right fit for Qantas. So they're effectively in part a stopgap measure over the next 10 years while they look for more sustainable options.
I feel a little bit sorry for Vanessa because Alan Joyce got all the big sexy announcements when it comes to the new fleet. He got the Project Sunrise, he got the extra A350s and the 787s. He was the one that did Project Winton. And what Vanessa Hudson's been left with, and no disrespect to them, she's been left with some midlife -8s. Yeah, I mean, Joyce made sure he left with all the big deals done and just one little thing to his successor. Can you just sort out getting some more -8s, please? Just because they're a bit old, aren't they? And she's been on there. She's gone on eBay or whatever it is, -8, Australia. She's found some because she's a finance person. So she's gone there, -8s, found some.
Gumtree,
Facebook Marketplace, and she's like, look. We could need a deal doing here.
Now I'm just imagining like her messaging someone on Facebook with like an ad that says, no time wasters, please. By the way, we did reach out because there were some comments on our story asking, what was going to happen with Lord Howe Island, because I think the Q400s are a bit big to be landing at Lord Howe Island, which sort of doesn't have a runway that can really handle them. We did reach out to Qantas Media. Qantas, they've basically said that they're committed to ensuring that Lord Howe Island maintains an air service, and they're going to be working with community and government on those options over the next few months.
So basically, we worked out that currently the airport wouldn't be able to facilitate these aircraft.
I believe that's the case. Currently, they're using like Q200s.
That's also that I'm very impressed that somebody's got in touch. I'm very impressed you called Qantas. That's proper journalism, isn't it? We've been on the ball.
We have
been on the ball.
So if anyone who was following that post is listening to the podcast, Qantas is working on it.
Qantas is working. That is proper. Again, we say it every week. Smiles on faces. That's what we're doing.
That's what we love to see here, Adam.
It's what we love to see here. Right, have we got anything else to talk about?
Yes, on the subject of carriers that are in a spot of bother, there's
Love
been
that
a
phrase.
a bit of a spot of bother.
But of course.
They're facing a bit of the sticky wicket. On the subject of carriers facing a sticky wicket, there's been a bit of good news from Air Vanuatu, which you might recall turned out financially to be something of a basket case. With books that were books that seem to have not been updated in ages, owing a large pile of money to people. But Air Vanuatu, its liquidators, Ernst & Young, have confirmed that they've received some non-binding offers for Air Vanuatu. They're not able to say who as of yet, but they are. But there have been companies a range of companies that have stepped in. To make offers for Air Vanuatu. So that does give you hope that Air Vanuatu will be back in the skies at some point soon.
So they only had, was it one leased 737?
Yeah, they had one 737 and a few ATRs for island hopping. And that 737 has been basically out of commission for a few months now due to repairs. So, hopefully once they can find someone to come in and bail out the company, they can get those flights restarted. Qantas, by the way, has been approved to start flights to Vanuatu with its own planes and with Jetstar planes. So, Air Vanuatu was a code share partner of Qantas. Possibly will be again once they start up, but that may have to be sort of renegotiated. What with ACCC competition concerns. But Qantas will be competing with Virgin on that Vanuatu route because currently Virgin has been the only airline flying from Australia to Vanuatu since Air Vanuatu folded.
Right, we have done 44 minutes. We've got time for one. We got one more story, Jake.
I think we can do one more story. I think as a treat, we can give him one more story.
They don't deserve you. Go on.
I know, Adam, but I do it anyway out of love. This is a story out of New Zealand. We mentioned this a little earlier, but Jetstar is it's doing what it says its biggest expansion in New Zealand in about 15 years since it entered the country. First of all, there's going to be another A320 based in Christchurch starting December. That will bring the total Jetstar fleet in New Zealand to 8. There's also going to be new routes launched from Auckland to the Sunshine Coast. So there you go, Auckland to the Sunshine Coast and Christchurch to Cairns. It will increase capacity on its domestic routes, including Christchurch to Auckland and Auckland to Wellington. So there's going to be 3 weekly Jetstar flights from Auckland to Sunshine Coast starting on the 13th of December. 3 weekly flights from Christchurch to Cairns starting in April. And it's going to be tweaking its flights out of Melbourne to Christchurch to improve connectivity with its long-haul international network. And this is coming as Jetstar is tipped to return to full pre-pandemic capacity in New Zealand this year.
So more good news for Jetstar. All right.
More good news for Jetstar. And so a little bit of extra good news for New Zealand passengers as well, looking to go to Melbourne because not Air China. China Airlines, don't mix those up. Very bad to mix those up. But China Airlines, the Taiwanese carrier, is launching a new seasonal link from Melbourne to Auckland later this year in December. It's going to be the 4th airline that will be operating between Melbourne and Auckland alongside Air New Zealand, Qantas and Jetstar, and it's going to basically bring that route back up to full pre-COVID capacity, which is good news because it's been sitting at around 75%, and that is not great for airfares.
It's not great for airfares, right?
Well, I mean, it's great for people who want to charge more for airfares.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, but yeah, so some good news for New Zealand with some more flights coming in the near future.
All right. So now before we wrap up, two little shout outs I want to do.
Oh, 2 shout outs.
Yeah. Firstly, I want to say a big thank you to Jordan Kremers-Taylor.
Jordan the Great,
of course. He drove myself and Jake and Ben up to Canberra last week for a little road trip. Thank you.
It'd be down to Canberra, really, because we're going south.
Whatever.
We're going downhill.
Whatever. Yes, going downhill. Going ahead. Anyway, thank you. It is appreciated. Second shout out we have is that for those of you Nelson watchers, who are eager to see what musical you are doing next. You've had some good news, haven't you? You've done it again.
Yes, and I can't really say until the cast list is announced.
Oh, really?
But,
so you were told nice and early, but they're still interviewing. They're still auditioning.
Well, they're still they are still looking for people to fill a couple of key roles. So the cast list hasn't been announced. I'm going to have to keep mum on the subject, but. I have there's another musical that I have lined up, so watch this space.
When the embargo lifts.
When I'm free to speak.
Okay, right. On that note, we will wrap it up for this week.
There is just one more thing, Adam.
No.
There is one more thing.
Gone.
I really respect you as a journalist.
I don't know what to say to that. I feel you don't be nice to me. That's just weird because now I don't know.
I really respect you as a journalist.
What kind of sick
idiot?
Yeah, what kind of sick, twisted move was that? Blimey, bloody hell! Right, we're going to end the show. Jake, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
And we will be back on the show the same time next week. But for now, from us, goodbye.
Goodbye.